Hi everyone, I'm Jessica Trimble with Indiana Disability Rights. I'm the Director of Communication and Outreach at Indiana Disability Rights, and I'm going to introduce our other presenter here.
Sure, my name is Fong Nguyen. I am a graduate student at Purdue University studying organizational communication. We are super excited to be here and to share the findings we've been working on for the past few months. And thank you so much for attending the webinar as well.
And just so you know, we are going to take questions throughout the presentation. So you should see a chat box on your screen and you can type in your question. And even if it's not a time to break, if you want to just type your question in before you forget it, we do have Michelle Wickham monitoring those questions for us. So when we come to a breaking point, we'll have her ask the question and we'll be able to respond. Also, we are going to be archiving this webcast or webinar. So we are going to tape it and we will upload it to our YouTube channel. And we can send the link out to everybody. We will also be sending out a link to this PowerPoint, or we'll send the PowerPoint out to you. And we, once Fong's final paper is done, we'll be sure you have access to that as well. We also will be adding a transcript to the YouTube video. So give us a little bit of time to get that posted. We want to make sure that's accessible. So with that, again, welcome. We're so excited that you're here. I know we've got people all across the country, so good afternoon to some, good morning to some. And with that, we're going to get started. All right, so you know the title, you knew it was coming, People with Disabilities and Social Media. So first of all, I'm going to let Fong do her thank yous.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Jess. And before we get started, I would like to thank the following individuals for their help with this project. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Melanie Morgan, who has kind of brought this whole idea, come to life and for us to work with Jess and other people at IDR to come up with the findings. Then Dr. Bart Collins for helping me with the statistical test. I also took 2 classes this semester that was tremendously useful by Dr. Soren Matei and Natalie Lambert at Purdue University. And for our lit review, one of the very, very important pieces of information we took was the report produced by State Austin and Disability Rights Texas on how people with disabilities use social media. So I would like to thank Diane King and Cleda Sweet and Jennifer LeBlanc, the 2 researchers from Texas A&M, for giving me the insights on their research as well.
All right, a few other thank yous. A huge thank you to the Indiana State Department of Health and Phil and Nicole for being here today. Just a little background of our connection with State Department of Health. I actually used to work here and work on webinars with Phil. So when we wanted to present a webinar, I immediately called him up and emailed and asked if they'd help us out. So big thank you to the State Department of Health for their assistance. We would not be able to have such a professional quality webinar without you. Also, another thank you to Safe Place in Austin and Disability Rights Texas. They did some instrumental research in 2016 that was actually the foundation for what Fong did in her research. So we just want to thank them so much for not only doing the research, but being so willing and open to share that information with us. That was really helpful. So thank you so much to everybody. Also want to obviously thank Purdue. I'm very thankful for that partnership. We were talking about relationships before the webinar. So my relationship with Purdue is that I actually did my undergraduate and graduate work there. Luckily still maintain some really great friendships with professors. So when the opportunity to work with Fong was made last fall and the opportunity to really dig into a topic I was curious about, we were really excited. So that's the benefit of keeping those relationships strong, is we got some great research out of it. So just to start off, obviously we're not asking you to respond since you're in your computers and we're here. So real quick, how many of you know what social media are best to use to reach to your intended audience? This is something that we talk about all the time at IDR is who are we trying to reach and what's the social media? And honestly, we thought we knew, but we really didn't feel confident. Do you have clear goals outlined for your social media? Honestly, for us, we're still working on that. Our initial intent was to make sure we had a presence and to start posting things on different social media sites. But as for clear outline goals, that's something we're still working on as well. And then finally, I'm sure you're all chuckling at this one. Do you have sufficient staff and resources to accomplish your goals? I feel pretty safe to say that everybody's probably saying no out there. I know that even though we're lucky enough to have a staff of 2.5 people, at IDR that do communication and outreach, we can always use more staff. So these are kind of those questions that we wanted to start out with to talk about our project. So our project objective was we wanted to use data and research to guide where we invest our resources to maximize our impact. Our big challenge was, okay, great, we're posting on social media, we're posting on these platforms, but are we getting engagement? Are people learning information that they didn't know before? Are people going into our website? And more importantly, are they coming back to us for more information? Are we credible? And we weren't quite sure if we were doing this or not. So we really had a lot of questions. And then as we all know, like I said, we have limited resources. So we wanted to make sure, okay, we can't do everything. So where do we focus our energy to make sure we're doing the things with the most impact? So with that, I am actually, I'm still going. Never mind. So we have our research questions. So initially when Fong and I started talking, I provided her with a marketing brief with some background on IDR. And then I also provided her with some research questions. Now, we operated under the assumption that these questions had some flexibility. These were just my initial questions, but we could kind of work with them over time. So this is initially the things I wanted to know. So based on research, how are different generations of users engaging with social media? So I think we all know in the P&A world, we're trying to reach out to a lot of people. We're reaching out to parents, family members, caregivers, individuals with disabilities, legislators, perhaps other attorneys. And so obviously these people are in different generations. So how are they engaging with social media? And then based on research, where are different generations of users going for trusted resources? This is a big deal for us. So at IDR, we really didn't have a very large presence in Indiana until a few years ago. So we wanted to be credible, but we weren't sure how to utilize social media platforms to increase that credibility and visibility and to make sure we were trusted. And then based on research, how are individuals with disabilities engaging in social media? So really that question was, what are the most utilized platforms and by whom? And then if we have to choose where we spend our time to reach our populations of focus, what platforms should we focus on? I don't know about you all, but I'm definitely not cool anymore. So I have no idea what teenagers or college students or individuals in their late teens, early 20s are using. And we know that's a population we want to reach. There's a lot of first-time voters in there. There's a lot of individuals that are maybe their parents aren't making their decisions and they're making their decisions. So we want to make sure we're seen as a credible resource, but I honestly wasn't sure what was the best way to reach those individuals in that age. So how much original content should we be creating? I think we can all assume that creating original content takes a lot of time and work. So my question was, is the original content we're making getting any engagement, making any impact? Because if we're spending so much time on it, we really want to make sure we're getting a good bang for our buck. So my question was, who should our populations of focus be for those posts? What kind of original content is getting the most engagement? And how often should we create and post original content? Is this something that's okay to do monthly, bi-weekly, weekly? Where do we need to put our energy for this? And what are ways to push people from social media to our website? So we might reach people that are not going to know to Google us and find our website, but they might reach us in the areas of social media. So how do we use our social media presence then to push them to our website as an additional resource? And then based on our analytics, what are the best days and times for posting to different platforms? So yeah, I have a 9-to-5 job, but obviously people are on social media outside of that time. So we really wanted to be able to utilize the tools and information to figure out what was actually the best time for the end user, not necessarily the most convenient time for me as an employee. So with that, now I will turn it over to Fong, and she's going to give you some information about the research that she's conducted.
Thank you, Jess, for giving us a very clear outline of how our project started. So I'm just going to give you a quick preview of what our project looks like. So we started in September of 2016. So that was last September, and we are just now wrapping up. So it seems like a long period of time, and it was a long time, but we wanted to take the time to really understand what it is that we wanted to find out, and what can we find out given the resources and tools that we had available to us. So the first thing we did, we took a very extensive review of scholarly and industry research on people with disabilities and how they use social media. And as you probably can guess at this point, there isn't a whole lot out there. That was actually the first thing we found. But we were very fortunate to find a piece of research that was done, again, and Jess mentioned this earlier, from Safe Place, Texas, and it's Disability Rights Texas, on people with disabilities and how they use social media. So I reached out to researchers from Texas A&M to get a feel of how the research process went for them and what really stuck out for them in this process. And then once we have all these resources, this is actually going to be the bulk of our presentation today, is we look at the analytics portion. So we wanted to see, what the lit review is telling us what people with disabilities would like to see on social media, but it isn't really telling us what they actually are doing or engaging on social media. So with that being said, we wanted to look into the analytics portion and to see what we can find out from there. So within the scope of the presentation today, unfortunately, I won't have the time to go through all of our resources. And actually, we're planning on making it public, the report, so you can go back and take a look at it and see all of the resources that we've researched and found helpful in our process. But I wanted to focus on the analytics portion today. Also point out a couple of interesting, most important, findings from the lit review. So with that being said, what did we find? So the next part, I'm going to go through the 4 key patterns about social media use in the disability community very quickly, just to kind of give you, some ideas about the most important findings in this process. And then I would encourage you to kind of keep these, overarching themes in mind, and then before we go into the more detailed explanation of how we arrive at these findings. And obviously, social media is so broad, and there are so many different areas that we do not know about. So hopefully this, project will give you some ideas about people with disabilities and their use of social media. All right, so the first key pattern that we identified is Facebook is still the single most important platform. And this has to do with one of Jess's questions, earlier when we talked about, with all these platforms, how do we know what to focus on? And obviously there are different options. You've got Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest, Twitter. But if we had to choose one platform to focus on, that would be Facebook. The second pattern we found is video is the most engaging type of content, meaning compared to photos, status updates, or link shares, video posts actually are getting the most likes, comments, and shares across the board. The third pattern we identified was that news stories in terms of content, not instructional or announcement posts, are receiving the most attention from the disability community. And the last finding is in terms of time and date, Saturdays might be the most effective yet underused days to post. And I'm going to explain now how we arrive at these findings. All right, so like I said, we started out with conducting a research, right? A lit review on, so what did previous research tell us about social media? And within this process, I tried to narrow down, the lit review within the scopes of the 9 original questions that Jess provided me with, simply because there's so much out there about social media, and we really had to identify and pinpoint what are the most important information we need to know. So just a number. The first number, 69% of all adult Americans use at least one social networking site. And this was the most updated Pew Research in 2017. And when this number came out, and I don't think this is very surprising, actually. We all use social media. So the fact that 7 out of 10 people actually are on at least one social networking site just kind of emphasizes on the fact that it's no longer a question of whether we should be on social media. So it's not just a feeling, it's intuition. It's actually backed by data. People are on social media. And if we want to use this platform to reach out to our audience, we need to be on there and not just do social media, but do it right as well. And the chart right here, if you take a look at it, this is from the Reuters Institute in 2016. What I found really interesting here is we realize that social media is becoming a more and more important source for news. People get on social media for different reasons, right? For to connect with other people, for entertainment purposes, to find out information for anything. But the fact that in 2013, if you look at the chart right here, right, in 2013, and the yellow dotted line is the number of people who use social media for news. In 2013, we were out 25% people who use social media users for news. But fast forward 3 years, that number is 46%. So within 3 years, this number of people going to social media for news almost doubled. And this doesn't mean that people intentionally go to social media for news, but what it signals is that people run into news a lot on social media. And this is where people, accidentally, as we might say, find news and information about certain issues that they care about. So in terms of platforms, if we, again, I'm just kind of pinpoint a few of the, pieces of lit review that I found most interesting within the time limit that we have. But if you look at comparing platforms, right, now that we know social media is where people get news, this is where we need to be on. The next question is, which platform should we pay most attention to? And if we looked at the table to the right, about 80% of online adults use Facebook. So what this means is, as old as Facebook might sound, it is still the platform with the most users. Instagram, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and Twitter, they're pretty close to each other, but there is a big gap between the pool of people who use Facebook and those who use the other platforms. The other interesting fact, too, is not just that Facebook has the most people. When people are on Facebook, they also spend more time on this platform, meaning Facebook is a much more high-value platform. People spend time to engage with the content on Facebook. So putting our resources where Facebook is might be the best way to maximize all of the social media platforms. Another interesting finding was most social media users use more than one platform, right? So if you look at the chart to the table to the right, for example, the number to the top right corner, what it says is that 93% of Twitter users also use Facebook. But if we look at the bottom left number, 29% of Facebook users actually use Twitter. So it's just kind of an interesting dynamic in terms of what platforms people are using. So that was a very general, findings in terms of how, the general U.S. population use social media for different purposes. So we were trying to also find out information about people with disabilities and their caregivers and the service providers, anyone who's interested in the disability community. And there just isn't a whole lot of information out there about how they use social media. We were so excited when we identified this piece of research from Safe Place and Disability Rights, Texas. So what they did was they interviewed 51 adults with different variety of disabilities and asked them questions such as, what do you use social media for? And again, I would like to really thank Safe Place Texas and Disability Rights Texas and the researcher from Texas A&M for conducting this research, because it was so instrumental to our research as well. And we used their findings to validate a lot of our results as well. So one of the findings that were presented in this report was, why do people with disabilities use social media? And some of the reasons are to keep up with friends as a social tool, follow issues, find out about events, learn about things, other purposes. Another important finding is, how often do people with disabilities use social media? And as you can see from the table, the majority of social media users use it multiple times a day. And then which of these topics would they be most interested in following through social media? And we have topics such as safety, legal resources and rights, healthy relationships, etc. And then back to the platform question. The majority of people with disabilities who use social media are on Facebook. So not only Facebook is popular among the general population within our disability community here, it's also the most important platform. And even though the questions about YouTube was not initially included, a lot of respondents from this study also mentioned that they use and follow YouTube. So just some really quick key takeaways from this the Lit review so far is that Facebook is still the single most important platform, and if we do have to choose one platform to focus on, I would say it would be Facebook. So if you are out there, spending a lot of time on Facebook right now, you don't have to feel guilty about it. It is still a good use of time and resources. And if possible, right, we do want to be on more than one social media site. But each platform is so unique that if we're going to use them, we do want to have a really good reason of why we're using them. For example, Instagrams is very mobile-friendly, visual platform. So our content would need to be able to adapt to that platform specific. Or Twitter, might have a younger demographic as well. So if that is the case, how do we go about making our content fit with the audience that are on these platforms?
So we're going to pause to see if anybody has any questions. As we said before, if you have a question for us, there's a chat box on your screen. If you just want to put your question in there, then Michelle will actually vocalize your question for us, and we will do our best to respond. Also, don't forget, if you think of a question once the webinar is over, this is Jessica again. Don't hesitate to send me an email. My information is going to be on the last slide, and you probably got an email from me anyway with a link to the webinar. So if you do think of something after the webinar is over, don't hesitate to send me an email, and I'd be happy to either connect you to Fong or try to answer the question myself.
There are no questions at this time.
All right. Thanks so much. Then we'll just keep going.
All right. And if you think of questions later on, feel free to send them to us as well. Okay, so now that we've take a look at the Lit review, and again, like I said, this is a very small portion of the Lit review that we conducted. On the full report when it came out, I would highly suggest that you guys take a look at these different resources and see really what works best for you and what provides the most relevant information for you as well. But in the next phase of our research project, and we spent a lot of time trying to think. What can we do now that we have the Lit review, and we realize that there is a gap in the literature about people with disabilities and their community and how they use social media, how they engage with different social media posts, how they likes, shares, and comments on these posts. So within our data analytics project, and we wanted to use data analytics, first of all, because this is probably one of the first studies that actually look into the disability community. Using data analytics. So data about how people with disabilities and their community actually use these different platforms, but also it helped us, just kind of use the technology that we have available right now to mine these data and analyze this data and come up with insights that would help us, maximize our resources with data analytics and social media. All right, so let me just briefly describe our data set here. So with this data set, what we did was we retrieved a lot of Facebook posts using this software called our Facebook. So basically, it's an open source program that allows us to go and mine social media posts from different platforms and then collect the data and analyze it. So the sample posts I will be presenting in this study is. So I started to I collected them on March 27th, but I only took the 5 most recent posts starting on March 24th. And the reason we did that was because we wanted to leave these 3-day cushion for these more recent posts to accumulate likes, shares, and comments. So at the end, we have a total of 3,500 posts. So 500 posts from each page. And we source them from the 7 popular disability rights Facebook pages. So they all, very similar in terms of, what they do. So that way we can have some uniformity in the data. And also we selected the more popular pages to assure that the page is popular enough that we can kind of differentiate the performance of individual posts. And we also decided that we're going to focus on Facebook. Even though other platforms are also very valuable, but within the time and resources that we had, we focus on Facebook because it is, the single most important platform compared to the other platforms. All right, so with that data collection process, we ended up with 3,500 posts. And on this chart, you can see the list of 7 different organizations that we collected the data from. So at the time of my data collection, North Carolina, their page wasn't active, but otherwise it would have been included in the data collection as well. So we ended up with disputed rights, Arkansas, California, Florida, Ohio, Oregon, Texas, and Washington. And if you take a look at the middle column, you can see the number of page likes for each of these pages. And you can see there is a wide variety here. So for example, the Florida page has over 36,000 likes. But then, the second one, but then Arkansas has a little bit over 3,000. So because of these, wide variety, we wanted to take into account page popularity when we analyze these different posts. So then I use a procedure that we call standardized metrics, and you will hear me mention the term standardized throughout the rest of the presentation as well. What it is we wanted to take into account the fact that some posts, because they are more popular, some pages that are more popular, so the posts had a higher probability of being exposed to a larger audience, and therefore these posts from more popular pages tend to get more likes, shares, and comments. So it wouldn't be fair to compare these posts, without taking into account their page popularity. So in order to do that, we calculate the z-scores, basically taking into account the average of each page. So if we look at the score, obviously higher the scores for each of these posts, the better it does compared to the average of that post. So that way, when we compare these different posts, the engagement, which is the number of likes, shares, and comments, was measured by how well a post does in its page, not just the absolute numbers compared with other pages, which might be more or less popular. So with that metrics, here are some of the questions that we asked and the findings. So the first question we were interested in was, what type of media is most engaging? And Facebook automatically divided the post into 7 types of media. So we have the note type, music type, event type, link, photo, status, and video. And you can kind of see from this, charts that link is the most popular type of media among all of the posts out of all 3,500 posts that we take a look at. And because note and music only has 1 for each type, so I had to exclude them out of the data sets in order to do further statistical tests. All right, and I'm going to provide some examples of each type of post now. So a status is a Facebook post that only contains text only. So an example from Disputed Rights, Ohio, as you can take a look at it, is purely just text, right? There's no other links or different type of media included. And then a link post is a Facebook post that contains an external link. It might or might not have captions, but in this case, the Atlantic.com was the source of the external link. So this is the second type of post that we looked at. The third one is video post. So again, if it contains a video with or without text. And I would like to note that in this video post type, YouTube and live videos count as well. So it's not just the original videos that you posted and shared on your wall, it's also YouTube videos and live videos that count toward this category. And a photo is a Facebook post that contains an image with or without text. And an event, as the name suggests, it's just a Facebook post that contains an event telling people this is what's happening, this is the time and date for it. So we dive deeper into these 5, different types of media posts, and we wanted to see what kinds of posts get us the most engagement or more likes, shares, and comments. And here are the findings. So video posts get more likes, shares, and comments than any other type of posts. And let me just kind of zoom in on each one of these charts. So the first one is the post performance in standardized likes. So if we take a closer look at this, you can see that video posts are kind of up there, right? So they get the highest number of standardized likes. Link is doing pretty well. It's the second highest one. And then we have event and photo and status, all under the other 2. The next metric, we use comments. So in terms of standardized comments, again, video and link still seem to be leading the pack. And in fact, videos still seem to be the best performing type of post. And we'll see a very similar trend with shares as well. Videos are still the most engaging type of post. So when we take a look, at all three of the metrics, standardized likes, comments, and shares, a very consistent trend that we notice is that videos posts tend to get more likes, shares, and comments than the other types. So from this finding, here are a few of the, and then if we really think back about it, right? Even though videos tend to get more likes, shares, and comments, we don't use them a whole lot. Only 196. Are more engaging, but not used as often. So agency could utilize more videos, but it's not just videos that you have to produce, because we do understand that videos are expensive, time consuming to produce. So live videos, YouTube videos will count as well. But a really quick note, and this is also one of the insight that the original report from Safe Place Texas told us, was that accessibility is a huge issue, and with some of these platforms, especially Facebook, sometimes not all the content is made accessible. So we want to make sure that if we are going to use videos, it's going to be made as accessible as possible. And links, as you can see from the previous charts, might be pretty effective as well. We're doing that well, we're sharing them, and we can continue to do that as long as we find relevant and interesting links to share with our audience.
All right, thanks, Fong. We are going to pause for another moment and see if we have any questions. Again, use the chat feature on the screen to give your questions to us. And Michelle, do we have any questions yet?
We have some questions at this time. So your first question is, in the Safe Place Texas research, did the people who mentioned YouTube say what they used YouTube for?
So yeah, that's a really good question. So from the report, and which we're going to send you the link to the full report as well, so you can take a look at it and see all of the findings that were written out from the report. But from my understanding, the answer about YouTube was brought up by the audience. It wasn't one of the initial platforms that the researcher asked whether people use YouTube. It was just brought up. So apparently a lot of people with disabilities use YouTube. And then the other findings, and I can go back to those slides as well when we talk about which one of these topics would you be interested in. These are more general questions across the board about social media. So I don't think there was a specific question about whether people, who use YouTube use it for, but certainly that's a question that, I'll be happy to forward the original research, and you can take a look at that as well.
Thanks for that question. Do we have another question, Michelle?
We do. What were the different disabilities that were represented in the Safe Place research?
Yeah, so I think, and I do have to double check to make sure that I'm giving this information correctly, but they took, there was a variety of disabilities that was, surveyed from the research, including mental, physical disabilities as well. And I don't have the exact count of what type. So I think what we might do is just I'll forward you the link to the original report so you guys can take a better look at the actual report. And the researchers did a really great job at outlining people that they talk to, the type of disabilities that they have. So that would help as well.
Our next question is, of the Facebook posts that include a link to the group's website, do you know how often or what percentage would have clicked through to learn more?
That is a good question. We didn't dive as deeply as to look into, what is the actual click-through rate, but that would be an interesting area to look into as well. So what we were more interested in was just, across the board, comparing the different types of media posts, what gets the most engagement. And the software that we use, what it does is tells us the number of likes, shares, and comments that each of the posts gets, but it didn't really tell us, the more specific metrics, which I do think is a very important area that we could look more into as well. So obviously there's some room for research to look closely into these more specific metrics.
And then a specific follow-up question to that one was, would it be more effective to link to articles that have a short description and then a link, or more effective to write a long social media post that doesn't include links?
I actually had a thought about that as well, because when we were going through the data, right, and we can tell that link is pretty effective, but I think we would have to do another research on top of that to be able to actually make a solid conclusion on whether a caption would make a difference there. I do have a feeling, just from observations and looking through like 3,500 posts, is that a good description is actually helpful because it tells people what the post is about, right? And also a lot of the time, like I would see links being shared without not a whole lot of description, so that makes it hard for people to know what you're talking about. So I do think this is just my untested intuition that it does make a difference. I think the more descriptive we are, the more interesting we make the post sound, it's going to gain more attractions. But again, we also have to keep in mind that we don't want to post things that are too long. Being concise is still important within the realm of social media. So yeah, that's a really good question.
And that's our last question at this time.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you so much for all the questions. So let me go ahead and move to the second question that we were looking at. All right, so the second question is, what type of content is most engaging? And maybe, some of the following questions could kind of help you, give you some ideas related, back to the questions that were asked earlier as well. So what type of content is most engaging? And we, had to think through this process and trying to figure out what would be the best way to categorize posts in terms of content, because there's a diversity of, post content of information that the different dispute rights agencies are sharing on Facebook. So in the end, what we decided to do was to categorize them into 4 different types: news, instructions, opinion, and announcements. And the reason why I categorize these in these 4 different categories, because from the lit review, we would suggest there was, some of the findings indicated that people do go to social media to get news, to get information, just to update it. So maybe if we have a category of news, would that be something that people are more interested in compared to, let's say, instructions, with which from the said place report, the finding just suggests that people do want to seek resources, legally or, in different topics as well. So if a post, features instruction, would that, be more engaging to the disability community? And then we also ran into the different type of posts such as opinion and announcement. And for this specific question, we were able to look at 700 out of the 3,500 posts. So basically, we took a sample of 100 most recent posts from each of the 7 pages. And the reason for it is because it is really hard to automate the coding process. So I had to go through, each of the posts individually, read it. Sometimes we had to go out to the external link to see what the post is about and what it would look like on the Facebook timeline to get the most accurate feeling of what type of post in terms of content our data set was. And out of the 700 posts, over 300 were news, and then over 200 was announcement, and then we had a little bit less of instructional and opinion posts. So a news post would be something that you would imagine to be in the feature section of the newspaper. So they focus on journalistic events. So examples would be lawsuits, settlements, political news, and research findings. Sometimes there are news coming out about different technology advancements that might help people with disabilities. So they're very newsy in a sense. Doesn't have a whole lot of opinion in there, just the most updated journalistic events that's going on. The second type is instructional posts, which provide instruction or guidelines. So most of the time they are white papers, different publications, fact sheets, and articles or videos giving how-to advice. So they vary in the sense their goal is to provide these sources for people to know how to go about certain things. And the third type we have is opinion posts, so focusing more on the expressing our opinions, how we feel about certain issues, sharing personal narratives about a very specific issues, kind of unpack a topic, look more into, from the individual experience or just from speaking from, opinionated experience, what certain issues that are related to the disability community. And the last one is announcement posts, which includes any update about activities, events, surveys, job posting, or any of the other posts that didn't fall into the previous categories. So once we have these posts categorized, so there's 700 of them being coded for this second question. We took a look at what type of posts, again, in terms of content, gains the most likes, shares, and comments. So let me take a look, kind of zoom into these specific charts. So in terms of standardized likes, again, that just means, we're comparing like scores across the board, taking into account page popularity. It looks like news is the most engaging type of content, with opinion is a close second, and instruction announcement didn't seem to gain a lot of likes. In terms of comments, again, news is still a more popular type of content. Opinion is a second, and announcement and instruction follow. The gap is not as big in terms of comments as in terms of likes, but you can see there's some difference there. And in terms of shares, news and opinions continue to lead as well. So what we wanted to do is, just looking through these all different kind of charts, a very consistent trend that we noticed was that news tend to gain the most likes, shares, and comments. So people, and this is when we really think about and validated it with the different, with the previous lit review, people do go on to social media to get information to stay updated. So that explains why news might be a very attractive type of information there. All right, and then again, we also are using a lot of news, so that's great. But one thing that I wanted to point out is there's a little gap between what people say they would look into and what they actually engage with on social media, right? So I can only speak from this data set, but if we look at this, only 81 of the posts are instructions. So it's not a very high number, but it also gets very little attraction. But from, the different surveys that were conducted, for example, the Safe Place Texas report, people with disabilities mentions that they do want to go to social media to get these different resources on, on different topics such as, legal rights, abuse, sexuality, different type of topics. So if they are interested in the instructional posts, perhaps there are different things that we can do to make these type of posts more engaging, more interesting to them. There could be other reasons as well, but that would be one area that we can look further into. So some key takeaways from the question number 2 is that news posts get the most engagement, instruction gets the least attention, and opinion receives second most engagement but was the least used. But I do want to make a note here that when we categorize these different type of posts, we also want to take into account what type of engagement we would be able to get out of these type of contents as well. We actually did an earlier presentation earlier today, and we had a really good discussion on how agency would be able to use some of these findings in terms of content type. And some of the questions that were asked was, were these findings, accurate across the board, or does it change over time depending on the political seasons, the different topics that become of interest at certain times? And certainly that is, for the research question that I would like to investigate as well. And also, thinking about opinion. Opinion gets us quite a bit of engagement. We get a lot of shares, likes, and comments, but we do want to be very careful with this type of content as well, because we do want to make sure that, it doesn't violate any of the guidelines, or it doesn't get us the type of publicity that we don't necessarily want to handle. So with those notes in mind, do we have any questions at this point?
And while we're waiting on questions, a few things to go off what Fong said. Yes, when we did this presentation earlier this morning, we had some great discussion. It was an in-person presentation. And so something we did discuss with the opinion is obviously with federal dollars, we can't lobby. So we've got to be really mindful of our opinion being used to educate and advocate, but not lobby. And the comment that was brought up this morning that I thought was really smart was Since the snapshot of social media was done the first quarter really of this year, first 4 months or so. And right now there's been a lot of discussion about the ACA and the new HCHA. So maybe that's why the informational posts might have been more popular than instructional posts, because right now we're not instructing people on what to do, but we're giving news and information on what's going on. So we thought that was a really interesting comment, that maybe around election time, or when you're a few months ahead of the election, when you're getting people to register to vote, maybe that's when an instructional post might be more popular than a news post. So we thought that was something that we can definitely look at in the future, is take a snapshot of social media at different times during the year when different things are happening, to see if that the results are consistent. So we thought that was a really interesting point and something we can definitely look at in the future. Michelle, do we have any questions?
We don't have any questions at this time.
All right, thanks.
All right, thank you. So the third question that we took a look at was, what are the best days and times to post on Facebook? And I think this is a very interesting question to ask, because we do know that there are a lot of factors that go into posting engagement and how people like and shares and comments. So I wanted to still take a look at these more mechanic factors, such as posting times and dates, and just to see if there's any consistent trend that we will be able to identify. So the first thing we did was we took a look at the posting days. So Monday through Sunday, 7 days of the week, and again we went back to our bigger data set of 3,500 posts, was divided into 7 days of the week, and we can tell that out of these seven different agencies that were in our data set, the majority of the posts were posted during the week, so Monday through Friday. There's a few posts on Saturdays and Sundays. But then once we look at the type of engagements that the posts get by the day of the week, right? In terms of likes, it looks like there's a little spike there on Saturdays. So on Saturdays, posts might be getting more likes. How about comments? There's also a peak there as well. And then if we look at shares, it seems like Saturdays are doing better than the rest of the day. And obviously, if we really think about this, there are different reasons why Saturdays might be as high performing as they are in this data set. It could be because it's not one of the weekdays. People don't really don't schedule their posts on the weekends. But then when they see a post that's super interesting, they just get it shared out organically. So that might explain why some of these posts, by nature, they're already better than other posts. But again, that's just kind of speculation. And it's kind of hard to be able to tell, the full story of why all the posts on Saturday seem to be performing better. But I do think it's significant that if we're noticing, these trends throughout the week, that Saturday seems to get us, higher engagement than other days of the week. But then if we went back to the number of posts for each day, we aren't posting a whole lot on Saturdays and Sundays. So one recommendation I would have is to try posting on Saturdays, just from these data-driven statistical tests. We're able to say that Saturday might make a difference, yet we're not using that right now. So the only way we can tell for sure is if we try and experiment this and see if Saturdays might be more engaging. But again, it is a possibility. And then you can kind of notice here, the numbers peaked a little bit on Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. But we aren't able to really confirm that differences is, again, not significant. So the only consistent, and I would say noticeable trend across the different days of the week is the performance of posts on Saturdays. Now, on top of the days of the week, I also took a look at the hours of the days. And I have to say that this is tricky. It is at one area that I'm not going to really make a recommendation here, because it is really hard for us to be able to confirm that certain hours of the day work better than others. And then when we were going through the different lit review, different sources, different trade publications suggest different times and days of the week, because it all depends on the industry you're in. It depends on your audience, where they are, what time they awake, what time they're looking at social media. But just, for the purpose of getting an overview of how these hours perform, here's what we can see is that a lot of posting happen kind of during the day, right? So from about 10 a.m. until about 19 or 20. And this is military time. So 19 would be 6 p.m. 18 would be 6 p.m. and 19 would be around 7 p.m. And there aren't a lot of activity going on, early in the morning or at the end of the day. And then if we look at the post performance by standard lights, and this is where the numbers can be a little bit misleading, because if we look at the few early hours of the day, right, 0, 1, 2, 3, 5 there, it seems like the engagement metrics are jumping up and down a lot, but also we don't have a whole lot of posting going on here. So it's really hard to say, the early hours is when the engagement peaks. Same thing with comments and shares. There's a lot of, there's a lot of activity, in terms of, engagement metrics, there's a wide variety when we look at the early hours of the day, but because the number of posts are so few, it's really hard for us to be able to look at hours and being able to say, if we post a certain hours of the days, it's going to be better. All right, so, in terms of posting times, I would like to repeat that, Saturdays might be our best days to try and experiment, but in terms of the hours of the day, it's a lot harder to detect any differences. And I guess in the end, it does come down to the content of our posts and what we plan to do with our posts, more than the mechanic of it. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just kind of summarize our findings so far. So in terms of platform, again, as we mentioned it earlier, Facebook should be the focus, but we should also try out other platforms as well, and have a really good reason for why we go into trying different platforms, as they all are very different. In terms of media type, video have the high potentials. In terms of content type, news and opinion are engaging, instruction could be made more interesting, and timing, take advantage of Saturdays. And we might consider Wednesday, Thursday, and Sundays, but again, these are with cautions. And I would say that we want to focus on the content of the post more than, the timing or of these posts. So just really quick, thought on the research limitation and future directions of this project. We do realize that there's, and Jess and I talked about this too as we went deeper and deeper into the project. We realize that there's more questions than answers that we are able to come up with. But we hope that this, project at least gave us kind of some ideas about where to test out the water at least, or where we can go and try out the different ways to maximize our engagement. The fact that the research is also very quantitative. So with a quantitative project like this, we try to identify the most, overarching themes in here, and it might apply very well to each of the specific situation. But again, I think because of the fact that there is very little research being done in this particular topic about the disability community and how they use social media, we know that we're taking one of the first steps to find out more information about this. And in future research could really look more into, the qualitative side of the findings. So not just, how these numbers break down, but also asking the question of why these numbers work the way they do. Just to kind of expand the different possibilities for research, we could look more into getting a bigger sample size and conduct the research with different platforms as well. All right, so that kind of wraps up the, the main idea of the project, and I will pass it on to Jess to talk about the next steps that we plan to take from here.
All right, we're just going to pause for questions. Michelle said we do have at least one question.
So ladies, we do have a couple of questions. The first one is, do you know if videos that are uploaded to Facebook so that they automatically play in the news feed get more interaction than videos that are simply linked to YouTube?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So when we mined the data, from our Facebook, it didn't really allow us the opportunity to be able to say whether it was, posted directly or is through Facebook. And also because from the data set, we only have about 81 videos out of the 1,000 of posts that we had. So I couldn't really test, the statistical difference and being able to say that if, it's the post posted by the videos or posted by the organization, if it would be different. I could tell from, just experience working on different social media projects is that the videos that we post, because, when people go through it, Facebook would automatically play these videos. Instead of if you were to include a YouTube links, it won't do that. And sometimes you have to click on the screen. So that's one extra step. And I'm sure you've experienced this as well. So, again, we would like to do a little bit more research to be able to give you a more concrete answer. But I think it's important to pay attention to the fact that videos that are embedded on Facebook are easier for people to access and to engage with. Now, obviously, videos that we embed, we have to produce them, and it is more time consuming, more resource costing. So that's another question that we would want to look at as well.
And what Fong and I have noticed as we keep discussing this project and different things we want to do and different questions we have, for that question, you've got to kind of weigh it out where, yes, if it's embedded within Facebook and it starts playing, you might have more engagement there. But if you do upload your video to YouTube and embed the link and someone clicks and opens that YouTube video, then they're connected to your YouTube channel and maybe they'll dig deeper and look for different videos on that channel. So it's kind of, at the end of the day too, you've got to decide what are you wanting? Do you want that video as a one-off where people are really engaging with that video at that time? Or do you want to use that video to draw them into maybe some other videos you might have on your YouTube channel? So sometimes you also have to figure out what is your end goal to decide where you're going to post it.
So our next question is, of the posts measured, and I assume they're talking about video, what kind of accessibility was there in the posts, such as captioning, and did the more accessible posts seem to get more engagement?
Yeah, so from the posts that we had, so again, when I was looking at the video posts, I went through the list of the 81 videos, and not all of them have captions. Only a few of them are accessible, or as accessible as we could make them too. So it is hard to confirm again if they would be more effective. But one thing we did realize is, from the lit review is, especially from the Safe Place report, a lot of people in the study mentioned that accessibility is an issue. So maybe here, I think the bigger question to ask is, not just if it's more effective, but is it helping us reaching out to more people if it's more accessible? And obviously, being disability rights agency, we want to make our content as accessible as possible. I would love to do more research to be able to answer your question and confirm, yes, if it is more accessible, it is more engaging. At this point, we don't have those numbers quite just yet. But, again, it goes back to our goal of making our content accessible so then as many people can reach it. But I do understand the concern, sometimes is that with the caption, it does make the post look a little bit lengthier. So it will be interesting to find out if that actually affects how people, engage with the post. Jess, anything you would like to add to that?
No, I think that's what we've really discovered in the process of this journey is, like Fong said, we have so many unanswered questions. This area of research has been barely touched. So the more we feel like we're learning, the more questions we have. So I wish we had more solid answers for all of your questions, but we're just looking forward to not only using the research that Fong has done, but then figuring out, where do we go next? What's our next step? Because there's so much out there. We all know we need social media. We know we need to be on it. That there's still a lot of mystery around it. So do you have another question, Michelle?
So Jess, just to follow up on that, you're already getting offers of, hey, are you interested in doing a qualitative project looking for partners, question mark?
Well, well, I will say, unfortunately for us, Fong is graduating this weekend, and she is going to be going to look for a paying job. Unfortunately, we do not have the funding to hire a permanent researcher, which would be great. But yes, we are always looking for partners. I do know that we at least have one very wonderful Purdue professor on right now. So if there are any other graduate students at Purdue that want to work on this project in the future, we'd be happy to partner. But if you have connections or if you have a research background and you want to work with us, we'd be more than happy, of course, to share all of our research with you. And even if you want to do something on your own and want to use our research, that it's going to be made available to everybody. We just ask that in turn you share what you find with everybody else. But yeah, we're really interested in learning more because we don't want to be reactive. We want to be proactive.
So we have one more question. Is there any way to measure the engagement of the disability community online versus other communities? And then she comments, I feel like the disability community is more highly engaged online with each other than with other communities.
Yeah, and this is the beauty of social media analytics too, is there are ways we can measure, how the disability community engage on the Facebook compared to other communities. So one example I could think of right now is there's different ways we can mine all the different, for example, right? So if we look at hashtags, we can look at hashtags that are more specific to the disability community and analyze those data quantitatively and qualitatively to be able to say, this is how people, the disability community engaged with social media. And then we can also look at hashtags that are more specific to other communities and being able to analyze those data in a very similar fashion, then compare these two. So there are, a lot of software and programs now that allows the ability to mine big data. So a lot of data, from social media, different platforms, Twitter and Facebook tend to be the most, analytics friendly. But certainly I think there are ways we can look more into it and discover the different possibilities in terms of, and I think that's a really interesting observation though, and would be very cool area for future research as well.
And that's our last question at this moment.
All right, so I'm going to wrap it up. So our next steps at Indiana Disability Rights. So as we've discussed, there are so many places that we could go with this project. But actually right now, we're just going to focus on the next 3 or 4 months. We are lucky enough to have another intern coming in, an undergraduate intern for about 10 to 11 weeks this summer. And she's actually going to continue some of the research that Fong has done and also put some things into practice. So we're going to test the recommendations. We're going to start doing what Fong told us to. We're going to see how it works. We're going to try different days, times, content, different things. And one thing we're really focusing on for this step is we are not going to try to treat anything as a failure, right? As long as we're putting out correct information, if only one person likes it, no harm has been done. So, we're not putting out incorrect legal information. We're just trying different things. So that's going to be our first thing is we're just going to try different things and see what works and see what sticks. So we're going to look at the different kinds of posts. We're going to look at the content within those posts and also the timing of the post. So those are some things we're going to play with this summer. Next, we've got some research that we are going to have her do. We're going to look at disability-related videos. Obviously, from Fong's research, videos got a lot of engagement, but we know they are resource intensive and costly. So we want to have our intern look at what disability-related videos are out there. I think we all know Rooted in Rights is an amazing resource for these videos, but we want to start looking at what's out there because if we need to create content, we want to make sure it's necessary. If somebody else has a great video, well, we can share it, we can use it. Fong's research showed us that we don't have to create all the content for it to work and be popular. Now, things that are going to need to be focused on Indiana itself, yes, we're going to have to probably create some of those videos. But if there are videos from other partners that we can use, we'd like to do that. Next is disability-related infographics. So something that we are going to be looking into is how do we use an infographic to communicate our information. Things that are very word-heavy and content-heavy we know can be off-putting to some people. We also know that pictures speak 1,000 words. So we want to start looking at what infographics are out there and what things are working and not working and popular. Another area we want to look into is pins. So on Pinterest. One of the things that Fong discovered in the literature and also from the research done by Safe Place and Texas A&M was I didn't realize how popular Pinterest was. I didn't realize actually, a few more people are using Pinterest than even Twitter. That's not something that we've done yet as Indiana Disability Rights. So I want to see what pins are out there that are disability related and what are popular. I'm very interested to see what's going on in that area. And then at the end of the day, we want to create a social media best practices and plan. Again, we say best practices because we know there are no hard and fast rules. I think if we've learned anything today, we learned that we don't know a lot and we're just going to have to see what's current and work with it. So this is going to ebb and flow and change, but we do want to create some structure and some information about how we do our job, right? If we're going to have limited resources and limited staff, then we want to make sure that we are prioritizing our social media and what goes on the social media to try to get, again, the most bang for our buck. So that's our end goal. So with that, we're going to open it up to any last minute questions. We know we're a little over our hour, but thank you again so much for tuning in, watching and listening. We hope this was helpful. This is obviously a first step in a long journey to be learning more about social media and how we should use it. But thank you so much for nerding out with us about this. We could do this all day. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to use the chat feature now. You can always email myself and Fong. We'd be happy to do what we can to answer your questions. Following this, we will send you a link to the Safe Place report. We will also send you PDFs of the slides that were from today. And then once we have the YouTube video captioned, or have a transcript, then we will upload that and we will send that out as well. Any of this information is for you to use publicly. Please don't hesitate to forward share, do whatever you want. All that we ask is that you give Fong and Purdue and myself and Indiana Disability Rights credit. That's all we ask. So if we have any other questions.
Just to add a little bit to what Jess was saying, we're also working on the full report. And we're trying to make it publicly available within the next couple of weeks. So this is and then on the report, we'll try to make sure that we get all of the resources that we found, through these 8-month research process. And you can look into and really dig deeper if you have any further questions about how, each of the sources was being conducted. So that's one thing we would do. And again, just to echo what Jess said, if you have any questions about any of the research, questions that we presented earlier today, feel free to reach out to Jess or to me. I will not be at Purdue a week from now, but I am, available and accessible via email and LinkedIn as well. So feel free to just connect with me if you have any questions or any research ideas that I will be able to be of service to you. And again, thank you so much for tuning in today.
And there are no questions.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate it. Have a great rest of your day, and we hope to hear from you soon.